Hello everyone, welcome back. This is Dunk. This is a video where I'm going to show off all of the things that are different in this update of TerraFirmaCraft Plus called the Clothing and Temperature Update. There's a lot to get through, so we're just going to get right into it. So let's talk about clothing. Here's an example of what it would look like when I'm wearing all linen clothing. Linen is a new type of material that you can make in TFC Plus. So we can see we have socks, pants, a shirt, a hat, and a coat, along with leather boots. And, we can take our coat off, we can take our shirt off, the hat, pants, the socks, and the boots. And you'll notice we actually kind of go up and down when we put the boots on. Because in vanilla Minecraft, you end up rendering the bottom of your boots into the ground, and didn't like that so much. But you may be wondering, how do we make these new materials? So I can show you that right now. You'll see here the loom. Loom's been in TFC for quite a long time. But up until now, you mostly only used it with wool, like this. And if you killed a ton of spiders, and you got 24 silk string, you could use it on the loom like that. But now we have a new item, and that is linen string. And so you can see we can just start, weaving our linen together, weaving our silk together, or weaving our wool. And you may have noticed we do actually have different numbers of these items left. It's always been 16 wool yarn to make a piece of wool cloth, 24 silk string to make a piece of silk cloth, and it is 18 linen string to make a piece of linen cloth. And the end result of that will be wool cloth, silk cloth, and linen cloth. In addition to wool, silk, and linen, we can also make clothing out of bear fur, wolf fur, and straw. Let's take a look at how we would actually turn these materials into clothes. So holding the material in our hand and with a knife somewhere in our inventory or on our hotbar, we right click. We see a menu that's very similar to the napping menu. And it's here that we're going to start to cut our material to form it into something that we can make clothing out of. So I'll walk you through all the different things that we can make here and all the materials that you can make them out of. The hat pieces can be made out of wool, silk, linen, leather, bear fur, and wolf fur. The shirt sleeves can be made out of wool, silk, linen, leather, bear fur, and wolf fur. The shirt body can be made out of wool, silk, linen, and leather. The pants piece can be made out of wool, silk, linen, and leather. The boot sole can be made out of leather, bear fur, and wolf fur. The boot top can be made out of leather, bear fur, and wolf fur. The strap can be made out of leather. The sock cloth can be made out of wool, silk, and linen. The coat body front can be made out of wool, silk, linen, bear fur, and wolf fur. The coat body back can be made out of wool, silk, linen, bear fur, and wolf fur. The saddle piece can be made out of leather. The quiver piece can be made out of leather. Making clothing out of straw is actually quite a lot easier. No knife is required, and no further processing needs to be done. The items that you can make out of straw are the hat, the shirt, the skirt, and the sandals. Now, once you have these pieces, you're going to want to know how to put them together. And the way we do that is by holding them in our hand and right-clicking. And that brings up this GUI. And I'm going to show you all the different ways that you can make the clothing with the pieces that you've made. To make a coat, you need a coat body front, a coat body back, and 2 sleeves. To make boots, you need 2 boot tops and 1 boot sole. To make a shirt, you need 2 shirt bodies and 2 sleeves. To make a hat, you need 2 hat pieces. To make sandals, you need 1 sole and 2 straps. To make a saddle, you need 1 saddle piece and 4 straps. To make a quiver, you need 2 quiver pieces and 1 leather strap. To make socks, you need 2 sock cloths. To make pants, you need 2 pants pieces. Even though we have our pieces, we still don't have a way to sew them together. And that's the next thing you're going to need. Alright, so we're going to need a bone needle. And the way we get one of those is by finding a hard rock and a bone. And we're going to smash the bone on the rock. Alright, we broke it. Broke it again. Broke it a 3rd time. And a 4th time. Oh, and yeah, so the item just happened to pop up behind us. We have a bone needle. But we're still going to need some string. So, we have our bone needle, and now we need to attach some string to it. So we could do that with some linen string. We could do that with some silk string. We could do that with some wool string. But I think the chances that you're going to have these resources early on are not that great. So the first material that you're probably going to have available to you is sinew. Sinew is a new drop that animals, anything that drops bones, except for chickens, so cows, pigs, sheep, wolves, bears, horses, they'll all drop sinew, and you can use that to make your threaded bone needle. Okay, so we have our needle. We're going to need a knife. You could use a stone knife, but I'm going to use a wrought iron knife here. And you're going to need your clothing. So let's right click with that. Just because we use the wool pants to open this, let's just make some pants. So we'll put our pants in like that. We take our needle and we're going to drag it down as best we can along the edge, right on the red line. Okay. Doing this very carefully. And you can see the sewn points. When I set this down, actually, do you know what? For demonstration purposes, let's just sew a line right through there. So yeah, I did a pretty good job on sewing the edges. They've all turned green. We don't really even have any red spots where we have incorrect stitches along the outside. And that's kind of why I added this here, just to show you guys what happens when you make a mistake. You know, the pants are pretty simple, but some of the other recipes, maybe not so much. So, you know, you might wonder what happens when you've accidentally sewn the front and back of your pants right through the middle. Well, you're going to take your knife, and by right-clicking, you can erase. Whoop. I'm going to erase that right there, and bam, look at that, wool pants. Let's take a look at a more complicated recipe, though. As you can see, our needle here has a health bar. That represents how much thread you have left. So the more thread you use, the more that will run out. When it does run out, you know, you're kind of in a bad position because you may lose all the progress that you've made on your piece if you exit the GUI. And the solution to that is to just take some string and put it up in here. It doesn't ruin the recipe, but when your needle runs out of thread, it'll be able to pull some new thread from the slot up here. So you can put as much thread as you want up in here, and it'll just refill your needle when it runs out. The bone needle is not the ideal tool to be using, though. Every time it runs out of thread, there's a chance you might break it. So if you want to have a better needle, later on you can go and make an iron needle, which looks like this. Next, let's talk about some new types of crops. As you may have guessed, linen kind of requires a new plant to be added, and that is flax. Linen is actually made out of flax, so let's take a look at what that looks like when you plant it. We also have madder, wode, and weld. When fully grown, you get flax, madder root, wode leaves, and weld root. And we can process flax into, let's do this, flax fiber, which we can then spin into linen string. So as you can see, this is converted into flax fiber, which we can see right there. And now we have these other three. And we're actually going to need a barrel of tannin to work with these. So let's say we take our madder root, we put it in our tannin, and we seal it. It says red dye. With our woad leaves, we get blue dye. And with our weld root, we get yellow dye. But there are actually two more dyes. And to make them, we're going to need to break a fire pit. And you'll see that actually drops some ash. And the amount of ash you get is relative to how many logs you've burnt in the fire. So if we unseal this and we put some ash in, we get white dye. And if we put a marking, which you may remember you get from squid ink, we get black dye. Okay, we've waited a bit of time. All of our dyes are finished, and we can start experimenting with them now. So let's start with the red dye. We have our wool shirt, we'll put it inside, and we'll wait 4 hours. Alright, 4 hours has passed, and our shirt is actually a little pinker than it was before. So let's take it out, try it on, and see what that looks like. So there we go, we have our pink shirt, but maybe we want it to be a little darker than this. We just pop it back into the red dye for another 4 hours. Alright, 4 hours are up. Let's take a look. Yeah, that's quite a bit redder than it was before. But maybe we want to let it go a little longer. And there we go. I think this is quite a bit more red, pretty significantly red. But that's, you know, kind of boring if you can just make it go pink, you know, pinkish red, red. Let's try mixing some colors. So let's put a bit of yellow on our shirt. All right. 4 hours is up, and let's look at this. Alright, so this is a little more orange than it was before. And we can keep doing that. You know, we could put it in the white dye, put it in the black dye. The white dye will make it a little more pale. Let's see what that will look like. Alright, so we've done that. And you can see it's quite a bit lighter than it was before. We could leave it in there a little longer just to see what that looks like. And we can see it's kind of a very interesting peachy color now. So yeah, using this whole system, you can get a wide variety of different shades on your clothes. If you do though, try and remember what order you did it in and how long each piece spent in each dye, because that will affect the final result that you're going to get. So we've put our peachy colored shirt into the blue dye, and it's kind of turned this interesting gray color. You know, just the way it had sort of been washed out and the way these colors have all kind of mixed together, we've got kind of an ugly gray color. But, you know, we could work with that. Let's see what happens if we leave it in the blue a little longer. Okay, and we have done that, and we have this sort of bluish gray color shirt. So that's interesting. And yeah, you know, as I said before, I hope you guys can really see that there are a ton of possibilities that you can sort of use, mixing and matching the white and the black and the red, the blue, and the yellow, just to make any kind of color combination you want. But now let's talk about why you actually want to wear clothing. I'm sure most of you have noticed the bar on the right hand side of the screen. It seems to go from blue at the bottom to red at the top. And there's a bit of green and yellow in the middle. That's the temperature gauge. When you're in that green zone, that means that you're in a comfortable place. So you're not feeling too hot, you're not feeling too cold. Things are just right. And you can use your clothing to sort of affect how big that green range is. So we can look at clothing when we mouse over it. So we can see how much resistance we get from our clothing by mousing over it. So we can see we have cold resistance from our wool pants. We have 3 levels of cold resistance and -2 levels of heat resistance from our wool coat. We have 1 level of heat resistance from our silk socks. And we have 1 level of cold resistance from our bear fur boots. So by mixing and matching clothing, you want to try and maximize the size of your green bar and ideally keep the current temperature within it at all times. So you can see we actually do have one level of cold resistance already from our blue shirt that we're wearing. We can put on our pants. You may have noticed though that our little temperature thing is now in the yellow. The thing about wool clothing is that while, except for the wool coat, it doesn't actually give you any penalties, if you have at least 2 pieces of wool clothing on, your heat resistance will go down. So that means you won't be as well suited to being in hot climates. But let's see what we can do about that. In fact, we could add, you know what, we'll just search through here. Get our straw hat, because the straw hat provides, let's get it off the hotbar, 1 level of heat resistance. So we put that back and that will counteract the heat resistance that we lost from having our wool clothing on. But let's take this shirt off before we put our coat on, just so that it's not affecting us so much. You can see we still do get that big penalty to our heat resistance. And let's, yeah, you can see us, we're getting these little particle effects on us. Let's see what we look like. Oh, doesn't this guy look happy? But let's talk about what happens when you're too hot or too cold. So one of the first things you'll probably notice is a movement speed penalty. The next thing might be the mining speed penalty. So you're going to be breaking blocks a lot more slowly. If you're pretty uncomfortable, you're going to notice a skill penalty. So actually, if you're looking at your skills in the skill menu, none of your skills above novice will count when you're doing anything. So that's something to keep in mind. And ultimately, if you're far, far too hot or far, far too cold, you will die. If you are at risk of death, there will be a countdown in the bottom right-hand corner of the screen, which will tell you how close you are to actually dying. And you will also experience damage every few seconds. And the faster you are dying, the more damage, or the faster the damage will hit you. So the farther this bar is outside of your comfort zone, the less time you have. In fact, every level outside, you have 50% less time than you did before. So that's just something to keep in mind when you are out and about in the wilderness. So now we are at the bottom of the ocean, and we can see that we're actually quite a bit colder down here. And in fact, if we look at our inventory, we can see our clothing is soaked. And that's one of the ways that you can tell that you are not in a good place. You can actually see we have our death timer. It's already started. We are pretty cold down here. And so if we stayed in this sort of climate position for 9 minutes, we would actually die. So it's probably a good idea not to spend too much time in the water. When you're in the water, any bonuses that your clothing gives you to heat resistance or cold resistance are completely negated. So if it's the middle of winter and you fall into or fall through a frozen lake or into the ocean, doesn't matter how much clothing you have on, you're going to be in a very, very bad position. And so you're going to want to get out of there and get to a fire as fast as you can, because building a fire will actually elevate the ambient temperature to a comfortable zone. It won't ever make you too hot, just because I felt that in hot regions it would be really annoying if you had to avoid standing next to your own fire. But you could also use that cooling effect of the water to help you in hot regions. If you really can't stand the heat, you've made all your grass or straw clothing, it's still not enough, jump in a lake. That's your best option there. Alright, now let's talk about shoes. So you can see on the bar there we have the 5 types of shoes, including leather boots, that we have with this clothing update. And let's see what happens when we put them on. So, put on our grass sandals. If we hold shift, it'll say speed bonus on sand. So that means that if you're walking on sand with grass sandals, you'll move 5% faster. Grass sandals are by far the easiest shoe to make, so the bonus is not that great. If you're in a desert environment, that would be quite useful, but otherwise, not so much. We have the wolf fur and bear fur boots. They actually do the exact same thing as each other, and they give you a speed bonus on everything but sand of 5%, and no speed bonus on sand. We have the leather sandals, which are a 10% bonus on sand, and 5% everywhere else. And the leather boots, which are 0% on sand, and 10% everywhere else. So if you plan to be spending a lot of time on the sand, leather sandals may be the best all-around shoe for you. There's never a surface that leather sandals won't help you out on, but if you don't plan to spend a lot of time walking through deserts or beaches, the leather boots would probably be your best option. Of course, leather boots and sandals do not provide any bonuses against the temperature, so if you're in a winter environment, the wolf fur or bear fur boots would probably be the one you should go with. While a lot of the clothing doesn't really look much different depending on which material you make it out of, the bear fur and wolf fur hats are a pretty interesting exception that I like quite a bit. So we can take a look at what those look like. So here's our bear fur hat. Here's our wolf fur hat. We can see that in third person. In fact, I think I'll just leave the bear fur hat on for the rest of the video, and we'll see how that goes. Beyond clothing, there is one more thing you can actually make with straw. So if we grab our straw like this, and we do this shape, which some of you may be familiar with, we get a straw basket. So we can put that down, and look, we have 9 inventory slots. So this functions basically like a large vessel without any liquid storage, except that you can't pick this up. So if I break this, everything inside dropped on the ground. And that's partly to balance how cheap and easy these are to make. But this is the storage solution at the beginning of the game. So I know there's always too many things to hold in your inventory, too many seeds, too many ores, blah, 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 blah. And inventory management, especially without chests, is a huge problem. And so straw baskets are the solution. They're really, really easy to make, and you can just throw them down and put whatever you need inside of them. Another change coming this time. I've had some people complaining that getting a hold of lime is not always as easy as they'd like. You know, you need it to do leatherworking, you need it for metalworking, and it can be a huge pain in the butt if you find yourself limited by not having a source of lime. So we have a solution to that, and it is right here. So beaches will now spawn with seashells. So you can just pick them up and put them in a vessel just like you would with any of the regular flux rocks. Throw that in a pit kiln, or I don't know, maybe a forge might work, and it will turn into lime, which you can use, I guess, in glass making. You could use it in you know, for lime water, cement, anything you like. And now I'd like to talk about some changes with the forge. Alright, so you can see we have a copper sheet here. We have a ceramic mold and an axe mold on the side, which is kind of interesting. Previously, if you were going to melt something, you'd want to catch it in a ceramic mold like this. Let's put our copper sheet in. We also have this blowpipe. You may remember that the blowpipe was added in the previous update, the glassmaking update, which allowed you to blow glass bottles, but we now have a new functionality. So if you have a fire pit or a forge, you can hold the glass pipe, the glass blowing pipe. You can sneak, and you can right click, and that gives it a little boost of air, just like a bellows would. It's not as good as bellows are, but it is something that you can sort of carry around with you. It doesn't require any leather. And, you know, give a bit of an extra heat boost. So this may take a little while. So let's just, you know, come back when this is about ready to go. Okay, look at this, let's see. And look at that. We caught it in our ceramic mold and in our axe mold. So that's something you can totally do now. Any number of molds you have on the side here will always work to catch any melted metal. You can even use that to fill up tool molds. So, of course, only with the castable metals. If you put iron in there and an axe mold on the side, you're not going to get an iron axe head because TFC does not allow for casting with the higher tier metals. That's just the way it was. If you want that to change, let me know, and we'll see in the future blacksmithing update. But for the time being, that's going to stay the same. And I think I'd like to end by talking about one of the, I'm going to say one of the changes that's going to affect, apart from body temperature, affect the way that the game plays, I think the most, is going to be a quite significant change to the whole climate system in general. So the original climate code was written around, I don't know, 2013. I was like a first or second year university student back then. To be honest, didn't have a great idea of what I was doing, and I think the way that I was going about writing it could have been a lot better. I'm a lot older now. I have my degree, so I decided that it was time to update it, and I've done that. And I'm actually really happy with the result we have. It's more closely modeled on Earth's climate. I think it's personally faster than the old one was. I think it's more accurate. I think it provides more interesting climate areas. So we're going to have the equator is no longer 40 plus or 45 degrees Celsius, which is what, like 118 or something Fahrenheit, something way up in there. Something gross, high 40s Celsius. You're not gonna. We don't have that anymore. That was ugly. That was unplayable. So the equator now is actually quite hospitable. It's going to be very wet. You're going to have a lot of rainforests, but it's actually a pretty comfortable temperature. Right around the 30-degree north or south zone, which is for in-game, plus or minus 10,000 on the Z or Z coordinate. That's going to be very dry and hot. Those are going to be your deserts. In real life, that would correspond to the Sahara Desert, to the the desert in the southwest of United States. I believe also Australia, and some of the deserts in the southern end of the African continent. So in real life, we find that just because of the way that wind patterns go, you tend to get bands of really dry air on the plus or minus 30 degree zones. And so in TFC, that is where those deserts are going to form. Interestingly, though, that is kind of right in the middle of the possible spawn location for TFC. So I have taken a look at that, and I've adjusted it. So previously, players were able to spawn from around 5,000, Z equals negative 5,000, to around Z equals 13 or 14,000. But that's changed. So now you're actually able to spawn right from the equator 0, Z equals 0, right up to Z equals negative 7,000, which beyond that, closer to 10,000, was a little too dry, and I didn't want players to be, starting in a bad area. And then from 12,000 right up to negative 17,000 is also fine. Previously, when you got up to around negative 13,000, it was actually really uncomfortable, especially even in the summer. It just wasn't that warm, which should have kind of been a red flag for me, because if you translated the place on Earth where I live, it would probably be negative 14,500, and we have some pretty warm summers, even springs and falls. But the new climate system better reflects that. So right up even to negative 17,000, you could have, you're going to have a cold winter, but you could have an all right summer, which I think is a lot more fun. I've also changed how dry grass spawns, so it's going to be a lot drier before you start getting dry grass. Also adjusted how clay spawns, and I've made it so that clay should be able to spawn in rivers no matter how dry your area is. So even if you're in a nasty old dry grass biome, as long as you find a river, you should be able to find some clay. So I'm sure a lot of players will enjoy that change. I've spent a lot of time on this. I've put many hours into this, and I'm very happy to be finally releasing it. I'm sure there are still some issues, some bugs that I have not found. If you find them, please report them to me. Let me know. You can message me on Discord. We have a Discord channel, which I'll link in the description. We have a subreddit. which is reddit.com/r/tfc plus. Please, if you enjoy the mod, let me know. I'm really happy that so many of you have enjoyed it and have been so encouraging towards me. I think, apart from a few minor bug fixes, I'm going to take a little break from TFC development for a bit. I do have some coursework that I need to get done, or some stuff that I'm doing that I've been putting off while I've been working on this. But I'm going to get that done, and then I'll come back. The next major update will be called the Nature Update, which will include a ton of new animals, new trees, and just a more fleshed out environment in general. Alright guys, thanks for watching.